Hello everyone. All right, so the next program in chapter 7 is charge account modification. All right, so modify the charge account validation class that you wrote for programming challenge 3. So it reads the list of valid charge account numbers from a file. Use Notepad or another text editor to create the file. Okay, so we are going to make a modification of the program challenge 3, which I have here. So I'm going to open that. That's a different chapter. Okay, programming challenges chapter 7. The third one is charge account validation. Let me just open these two files. So this is our new question, and these are this is the old program, the class itself, and the program that's going to test the class. And so, I'll leave this here for a while because I'll copy these numbers and I'll use them later on. And so we have to modify this so that instead of basically just reading from the array, we read from the file first. We read the numbers from the file first, and then we can store them in an array and work with the array later on. Okay, so I'll need these numbers, right? So I'll just make a copy of this for now, and let's go ahead. Actually, let's save these two files as the new program. And so first of all, I'll just make a copy of this question. I'll cut it and I'll close this file. And then I'll save this. I'll save it as. But before I do that, let me go ahead and modify a few things. Actually, what I should do is the next program is called. It's charge account validation, right? Okay, so let's save it as. Let's save it as in programming challenges chapter 7. Let's create a new folder and call it charge account validation. Modification. Okay, and so now let's save this as. Now the name of the file has to match the name of the class. So we're going to have a problem here for now, but then we'll fix it. All right, so charge account modification, right? .java. That's going to be the name of the class. It has to match the class itself. So that's when we save this. When we try to compile this and run it, we're going to get a problem, right? So we have to first of all make sure that this matches the file name, which is charge account modification. So let's do that, right? So charge account modification. And let's also save this as something else, because now this is still the old program. Any changes we make to this will basically be made to the old program. So let's save it as, so we have a new copy of it for our new program, because we're basically going to be using the same program and modify it. And so I'm saving this also as. We'll still have to change a few things, but let's first save it as first. So I'll save this as. I'll call it charge account modification test, so we know the difference. And it has to match this, and so the name of the class has to match the name of the file. So I'm going to do that. Charge account modification test. Okay, now we still have to change a few things, right? When I compile this, we're going to get errors. So let's just go through the errors. Okay, now the name of our constructor in the old file. Now, if you haven't seen the program 3, it's you make sure you take a look at it, right? Because it's basically we are working off of that. So take a look at program 3 and then come back here and you'd understand how program 3 works, which is the charge account validation. Okay, so this is complaining because our constructor, the name of the constructor has to match the name of the file. Sorry, the name of the class. Okay, which is basically the same as the name of the file. Right, so the name of the constructor has to match the name of the class, which is charge account modification. And so we have to modify this and call this charge account modification too. So charge account modification, so it matches the name of the class. Compile this. Okay, and so this file seems to be okay, which is basically our class, right? Now this is the program that is testing the class. Let's compile this. We're going to I think we're good for now. We're basically good for now. Let's see. No, we're not. I'm sorry. Over here, when we are creating, an object, a charge account object, we don't have the charge account class anymore. That class has been changed to charge account modification. Okay, the name of the class has been changed to charge account modification, and so we have to basically create a charge account modification object. That's what we're doing here, and we're creating a new charge account modification object. It's probably not a good name, but we are sticking with the name of the program, of the question, right? And I think I hope I didn't override what I copied for the question. So let's see if I had it, and I did. Okay, and so we have now the question here, which is charge account modification. So this is our new question. I'll make a copy of this, and I'll also paste it in our program, in our the program that tests the charge account modification class. So let's remove this all. Okay, compile it. Let's see if we have some errors. Okay, we do. Let's see. What is it saying? Okay, I think I spelled this wrong. It's supposed to be charge account modification. Okay, compile this, and some more errors. Cannot find symbol charge account modification here too. New charge account modification. I don't know why I spelled it wrong. Okay, now it seems to be fine. So basically, we've made a copy of the old program. We've changed the names. We changed the name of the class, and so we also have to change the name of the constructor, because the name of the constructor has to match the name of the class. And when we are creating an object from that class, we have to make sure we are creating an object from the new class we just called charge account modification. That's what we've done. So now we can start the program. So now the program is basically reading from this charge account numbers array, but the question wants us to basically read from a file. So let's create that file first, right, and store in these numbers. And so on my Mac, I'm going to open up text edit. Make sure that your preferences for text edit, okay, in the new document tab over here, make sure it's set to plain text. Don't set it to rich text, because if you set it to rich text, you're going to have extra formatting behind your text that you can't see, and when you save it, it's going to be saved with it, and your text may end up not displaying well or giving you errors. And so make sure you set it to plain text. If you're on Windows, you can use Notepad. Okay, so let's make a copy of this, or basically these numbers here, line by line, and store it in a file. We have to break each one of these, so it's going to take a while. I should have yeah, so just see if I can find I'll use option. I think option helps make it a bit faster. Oops. Oopsie. All right. Okay. Okay. So now basically we have all the numbers stored in this file. All the valid charge account numbers stored in this file. Let's name this file charge account .txt. Okay, it's a text file, and let's save it where our programming challenges are. Let's see. This is Python. Let me navigate to where our Java programs are. So that's here. Chapter 7. Let's save the text file in the same location as the new program, which is charge account modification in that folder, right? So let's save the text file right there. And as long as we save the text file there, once we try to read from that file, we can just type in the name of the file, and because it's in the same folder, they should be able to see each other, right? If not, we would have to specify the path of where the text file is to the program that's going to test the class. Okay, so I'm going to save it right there in that same folder. Okay, and I'm not going to close this. I'm just going to kind of minimize it or hide it for now. Okay, so we basically have the numbers in the file, right? So we're not going to read from this array initially, right? So let's keep this array empty then. If that's the case, then let's keep it empty. So basically we have a charge account numbers array declared. So what we should do is anytime someone tries to create an object from this new charge account modification class in the constructor, let's let the constructor now basically read from a file and then basically read all the numbers in this file and then store all these numbers in this array. And then later on we can work with the array. We are reading the numbers from a file, basically storing all these numbers in an array, and then we can now work with the array. We are no longer reading directly from the array first. We're reading the numbers first from the file, storing it in the array, and then working with the array. And so, since we're going to be working with files, right? Let's first of all import the file, the file class, right? Or basically all the classes that have to do with files, right? And so the way we can do that is we can use the import statement, import. We can use the import statement and say import java.io ***, which means that basically import all the classes in the java.io package, in the Java API. Okay, in the java.io package, basically import all the classes. That's what * means in the java.io package. All right, and so once we've done that, right? Anytime someone tries to create an object from this class, the person has to provide, okay, for now we haven't defined any parameter here in the constructor, but then let's define a parameter and call it the file name. And so that means that anytime someone tries to create an object from this class, this charge account modification class, the person has to provide the file name. And so let's define a parameter for that. And so let's define a parameter. It's going to be a string, and let's call it file name. We can say user file name. We can even call it user file name. And so first of all, what we want to do is someone will try to create an object from this class, pass in the file name here. We'll come back to this program. And when that happens, now we have the file name, so we can basically kind of open the file, okay, in read mode. Okay, we can create a file object to represent that file. All right, so I'm going to create a file object, and I'll call this charge account file. And I'm going to set it to, I'm going to basically create a new file object in memory. Now I need to provide it a file name, and the file name is what the user is going to provide us here. And so I'm going to pass it in as an argument here and name it, or basically, type in user file name. What this is doing is basically creating a file object, or kind of opening the file in read mode. Okay, we are creating a file object, and this is the file that we are trying to represent with this charge account variable. If this file name is wrong or doesn't exist, we're going to get an error. And so if we the user has to provide exactly the name of this particular file, because if the user doesn't do that, then we're going to have an error, right? The user has to provide exactly this name with the extension .txt, because this is a .txt file. Okay, so now that we've represented this file, the next thing we want to do is basically read from this file, and let's use the scanner, okay, to do that, right? And then let's make the source basically where we're going to read input from be this particular file. And so if you're going to use a scanner, then we need to import the scanner class. So import java.util.scanner. We're basically importing the scanner class located in the java.util package in the Java API. With the scanner class, basically we need to create a scanner object, right? And so I'm going to create a scanner object here. I'm going to call it it's going to be a long name. I'll call it charge account file to I just call it this was going to be a long name. Charge account file to read. I'll just call it charge account file to read from, right? Because it's a really long name. If you're comfortable with it, stick with it. I like long names. It doesn't really matter. But if you're comfortable with it, stick with it. If not, just change it to something that's short. But I just want this to be clear, and that's why I've kept it this way. So scanner charge account file to read from. And then I'm going to now create a new scanner in memory. A new scanner object in memory. Now I need to provide the source where I'm going to scan from. Now the source is going to be the file, the charge account file. So I'm going to pass it in here in the scanner constructor as an argument. And so now basically this charge account file to read from, right? It's really a long name, but I just want it to be clear. So this basically now allows me to basically read from this particular file. Okay, so let's see. So now that I have this scanner here, I can try to read from it. But when I read from it, I also want to store. I want to first of all read each line in this file and store it in the array, in the charge account numbers array. But I need to initialize this array because it's not initialized, so we don't know how many elements are going to go in there. To do that, we need to first know how many elements are going to go in there, and basically the elements that are going to go in this array, basically they are going to be the elements in the charge account.txt file. We need to first know how many elements are here, right? So you can count it, but guess what? What if you have a million numbers in a million lines in here? Then, or the thing is, you may never know how many lines are going to be in this file. You want to write the program in such a way that it's automatic. It knows exactly how many lines are in this file. So first of all, let's figure out how to get the number of lines in this file. Well, since we have a class, we can go ahead and create a method that that's going to do that. And so let's create an instance method, right? So I'm going to create a public method, right? Public, because we want this method to be available to code outside of this class. We want anyone to be able to call this method, okay, and get the length of a particular file. All right, so it's going to be an instance method, and remember we said instance methods don't have the keyword static, right? Instance methods are methods that directly work on the field of an object created from this class. And so because this particular method we're about to create is going to work directly on the field of this field of an object created from this class, we are going to work on this particular field. Because of that, because this method is going to work on this field, it's going to be an instance method, and instance methods don't have the keyword static, right? So it's going to be a public, the return type of this method. Now all we want to do with this method is basically return a number, right? So it's going to return a number, and that number is going to be the number of lines in a particular file. And so that number is going to be an integer, right? And so let's set the return type to be an int, and let's call this method get number of lines, right? Now let's think about it for a second here. Is this method going to accept any arguments? Of course, right? Because it's going to need, first of all, the file to get the number of lines from. And so let's define a parameter, which is going to be the file name, okay? And so I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to say this is going to be a user file name. This is a parameter that I'm defining. It doesn't matter if it is the same as this. These are two different methods, right? They don't see each other. Okay, the scope of this user file name is within this get number of lines method, and the scope of this user file name is within the constructor. Okay, so the get number of lines is first of all going to need the file name, and so the same way we created, before that we are not done with this constructor. We need this method to continue, and so that's why we've kind of paused this and moved here. And so the same way we basically created a file object and created a scanner to read from that file, we're going to do the same thing here. We are going to create, we're going to create a file, basically represent a file, with a variable. So charge account file over here, doesn't matter if it's the same thing, because again, everything in here, the scope of this particular variable is within this method, and the scope of these variables are within this method. So it doesn't matter if they have the same name. We are representing the user file name, the file name that the user provides, that particular file with this variable, creating a file object and representing it with this variable. And that file object is basically the file that the user provided the name for. So we're creating a file object, and we want to also create a scanner. We We've imported our scanner class. We want to also create a scanner to read from that file. And so I'm going to basically have the same line, same thing. And now we're basically creating a scanner. I'm calling it the same thing, charge account file to read from, right? Because it's going to be this time over here it's calculating the number of lines, and over here it's actually reading the numbers itself. So content may be different from this, but it's the same process. We are representing a file and then trying to read from the file. Over here we're doing the same thing. Okay, and so now let's read it. So to read a number of lines, right? First of all, we have to check to see if the file has any line. Okay, if it has a line, we'll try to read the first line, right? We're going to say that if it has a line, then read it, then move on to the next line. If it has a line, read it. Okay. If it doesn't have any line, okay, then stop. Okay. So basically, we are going to use a while loop to go through this file. And so I'm going to create a while loop and say that while, first of all, let me create the structure and say while the name while this is the scanner. This is what we are, this is the scanner object is what we are using to read from the file, right? And so let's use that. While the charge account file to read from dot has next is basically going to check to see if this file we are trying to read from has a next line. So it's going to first check that to see if it has it's going to first check to see if we can read a line from. So it's going to try to read a line, and of course it can get a line. So this whole thing will return true. So while it has a next line, okay, has a line, then what we want to do is we want to keep count of how many lines it can read, okay, or how many lines it finds. And so while it has a line, so it tries to read the first line, has a line. So let's keep track of the number of lines.